Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to pick back up with the X-Men series that had launched in 1991. Now, here's the thing, because I do know that some of you guys out there want me to cover the Uncanny X-Men, because in our last video, I did technically leave us on a cliffhanger, but we have to jump back over here first to cover a three-part storyline that does lead into Operation Zero Tolerance, but at the same time, once we do that, we can then perfectly jump back over to Uncanny X-Men to kind of help bring those characters back in the fold for the whole idea of Operation Zero Tolerance, because we're getting very close into covering that crossover. Now, today's video, we're going to cover issues numbers 62, 63, and 64. Now, with this three-part story, you're really sitting down with the idea of Shang-Chi teaming up with the X-Men. And so as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with Shang-Chi arriving to this island. Now for Shang-Chi, the only reason why he's coming to this island is because he got a call from one of his old colleagues, Clive Reston. Now for Clive Reston, he's an old Marvel character who first appeared in Giant-Sized Master of Kung Fu issue number 3. Now for Clive, the reason why he called Shang-Chi is unknown to us, but for those two characters used to work together for the MI6 days. But either way, for Shang-Chi, he kind of realized that it must be really something important for Clive to call up Shang-Chi. The problem is that when you have Shang-Chi arrive at the home of Clive, he's then confronted by, man, I honestly hate the name of this ninja group. I don't know why. It just sounds pretty wild and crazy to me. But they're called the Sci-Fi Cyber Ninjas. Yes, you heard that right. But either way, when it comes to this group, they used to work for Shang-Chi's father. Now, with his father being dead, for Shang-Chi, he's kind of surprised to see them here again. But either way, when it comes to Shang-Chi, we do see him be that great master of Kung Fu and being able to hold his own against them. But we do see here that the only reason why they're currently attacking him is to collect information about him. The idea that he used to be the master's son. And so once they do get that piece of information, they want to leave. But then you have Shang-Chi be confronted by Wolverine. Now, Wolverine being there, we do learn very quickly here that Wolverine was also contacted by Clive Reston as well. Now, here's the thing about the X-Men at the moment, because the reason why I said earlier on in this video that some of y'all possibly want me to go ahead and cover Uncanny X-Men, half the team right now is in space. Gambit, Rogue, Beast, Bishop, and also Joseph, better known as Magneto, they're in space right now dealing with things with Deathbird. And so for the rest of the X-Men, they're currently on Earth. But at the same time, for the X-Men, they're also missing a few members as well. Like, for example, Angel and also Psylocke, they have left the team, and that will actually lead into a mini-series we have to cover called Crimson Dawn. But at the same time, you also had Iceman leave the team to be with his father, who was brutally beaten down by a few guys who are working for Graydon Creed. And so for the X-Men at the moment, the ones on Earth, they're kind of short-staffed. All they have is Cannonball, Storm, Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Wolverine. Now, technically, that is still a good lineup. Now, like I said, for Wolverine, he does tell Shang-Chi, they are here to also meet up with Clive Reston as well. Now, before we kind of learn why everyone was called here for, it does kind of lead into this cool moment for me personally. It's the idea that you do have Cyclops and Jean Grey right now just hiding in the shadows, because you have Jean Grey being able to use her powers as a way to hide their presence from Shang-Chi. But here's the thing, because with Shang-Chi, he kind of realized there's somebody else right now in the room. And of course, he is correct. That will be Cyclops and Jean Grey. But once he does show that he knows where they're at, you then have Clive finally walk into the room to explain what exactly is going on here. You see, for Clive, the reason why he brought Shang-Chi in is because Shang-Chi's father had this elixir, better known as the elixir of Vitae. Now, this elixir is really more technically being used as a way to create a cure for the legacy virus. You see, for Sebastian Shaw, the leader of the Hellfire Club, he wants to get the elixir and use the elixir as a way to create a cure for the legacy virus. And you would think like, oh, that's a great thing because the legacy virus is going around right now just killing off mutants left and right. But the thing is, for Sebastian Shaw, even though he would create a cure, he wants to sell that cure as a way to make a lot of money. And so for them, they want to team up with Shang-Chi to kind of stop Sebastian Shaw, but to also get their hands on that elixir. Now, when the X-Men do arrive in Hong Kong, you didn't have someone inform Sebastian Shaw that his guests had arrived. Of course, he already knows that the X-Men are in Hong Kong at the moment. And he says, okay, cool. It's now time for you to deliver their reception. And so, of course, you have the guy leave. And so as we do switch back over to the X-Men, you have the X-Men right now just riding around Hong Kong in 2 different vehicles to kind of make sure they're an easy target for their enemies with them now being in Hong Kong. But the problem is that in the first vehicle, you have most of the team just minus Wolverine and Cannonball. Well, that vehicle gets blown up. Now, luckily for our heroes, they had Jean Grey there. But the thing is, once you do have the team being able to regroup, you then have our heroes be confronted by another group of ninjas, more powerful group of ninjas. And so as we dive into the next chapter, we learn that basically this is more of an advanced group of the sci-fan cyber ninjas our heroes are currently fighting against. And really at first, it did seem like this might be an interesting battle, but for our heroes, you do have our heroes really being able to handle them in like a few pages, like the first good third of this actual issue. But once you do have our heroes get done with them, you did have Sebastian Shaw appear. Now, for Jean Grey, she really does express the idea that she's not really happy about Sebastian Shaw for 2 different reasons. Now, the main reason why, because this man did create the Dark Phoenix technically, or really had a hand in the creation of the Dark Phoenix. But either way, when it comes to Jean Grey, she does kind of express her anger towards him by trying to throw a car at him. But when it comes to Sebastian, we have to remember that he has the ability to absorb kinetic energy to make himself stronger. Now, you would think like, okay, cool. We're gonna see another battle with the X-Men fighting against Sebastian Shaw. We don't. In matter of fact, you have Storm say, listen, we were fighting earlier in the middle of the street. With that battle earlier, we had some, innocent people now wanting to see what's going to happen next. So let's go ahead and take this conversation somewhere else a little bit more private. Now, once you do have the X-Men leave, you didn't have Shang-Chi realize that Cannonball's missing. And we do learn that for Cannonball, what he did was he had saw this very disturbing rickshaw person. So you basically had Cannonball sneak his way onto the cart of the rickshaw. Now, with him doing that, he's then unfortunately loaded onto a truck for a company known as Fujikawa Enterprises. Now, this is a company that came really big in Marvel Comics around this time, especially over in Iron Man comics as well. But getting back over to the rest of the X-Men, when you do have the rest of the X-Men meet up or really have a meeting with Sebastian Shaw, you have Sebastian confirm, like, yes, he does want the elixir as a way to create a cure for the legacy virus. But it's also him saying, like, I want to be overlooking the actual production of the cure. I want to overlook everything about it. And it's also him kind of hiding the fact that there could be some personal motives behind the idea of the elixir. Now, here's the thing, because while you do have those characters have their meeting, you didn't have Sebastian walk away to meet with someone else in private. And that would be Rory Campbell. Now, for Rory Campbell, we saw him really more over in Excalibur comics. And when it comes to Rory, he was this scientist who was brought in to help Moira McTaggart to find a cure for the legacy virus. Now, unfortunately, she had gained the virus her own self. But with that being said, when it comes to Rory, he also had learned a dark future about himself, where technically he becomes this mutant hunter. And so for Rory, story, he has been trying his best to make sure that he does not become that mutant hunter. And so he left Dr. Moore Taggart behind to go work with Sebastian Shaw. And the reason why, because he's hoping that with Sebastian resources, they could most likely find a cure for the legacy virus. And so what he's doing right now is handing over all the information that Moore Taggart had gained over the years for the legacy virus over to Sebastian Shaw. But getting back over to the X-Men, you have the X-Men go out of their way to hopefully figure out who may have the elixir. And right now, it's the person in charge of the Fujikawa Enterprise company at the moment. And so you do have our heroes work their way into the actual headquarters. Now for Cannonball, he's there as well, but as we all know, because he was sneaking around, unfortunately got loaded onto a truck that led over to the building. But anyways, for the X-Men, when they do arrive to the main office of this business, you did have our heroes being confronted by the Kingpin. And so as we get into the final chapter of the storyline, what we're seeing right now at the moment, it's really more of us seeing the Kingpin really telling us that he may be holding on to the elixir or possibly just information about the elixir. Now, for the Kingpin, the reason why he's here right now as a leader of the company, Fujikawa, we're not really told. As a matter of fact, I want to say we're not really told at all. But when it comes to him being here, he is part of the company now. Now, at the same time, in Marvel Comics, I could be wrong about this, but with our heroes being away in the Heroes Reborn reality, like for example Tony Stark, his company was bought out by this company right here. So I want to say we're in that era of the two companies being merged together. But either way, for Wolverine, he wants to attack the Kingpin. Like, oh, you're holding on to information that could be very vital for us. Go ahead and hand it over. But you have the Kingpin say like, hey, if I was you, I would not do anything at all towards me because I caught your man. Talking about Cannonball, who was trying to sneak around earlier. And so for Cannonball, he's right now near this injection that may have a vaccine for the legacy virus, and it could or could not work, which means he could also gain the legacy virus as well. Now, the X-Men are the only ones there at the office at the moment. Matter of fact, you have Sebastian Shaw trying to work his way up the office building to get to Fisk's office to get the elixir for himself. And so we do see Sebastian Shaw being able to take out a few guards who at first believed that they should be able to bring him down. But the whole idea of how his mutant powers work just made him stronger. And of course, now he has the ability to go after Kingpin. But getting back over to the X-Men and their meeting with the Kingpin, you really do have the Kingpin explain like how he got here. So for the Kingpin, what he says is that in a storyline that involved him and Daredevil, you had him basically lose his criminal empire and having no choice but to go ahead and leave America, which he did. Now, when he did arrive in Hong Kong, two things happened for him. The death of Shang-Chi's father and the idea of him being able to move up the rank in the company. You see, when it came to Shang-Chi's father, he was a big-time crime lord. But with him being gone, it left the door open for someone else to take that role. And so the Kingpin, when he decided to go ahead and work his way up the chain of command for this company, it allowed him the ability to slowly take over that role that Shang-Chi's father used to have. Now, you also have the Kingpin go ahead and release Cannonball as well. But it's also him explaining that the reason why he wants the elixir is to, well, make a cure for the legacy virus, but it's the same thing as Sebastian Shaw wants to do with the cure, to basically make money off of it. And so it's him saying like, no, I want to keep this for myself. Now, we do get a couple of pages, and these couple of pages for me are really important because we're getting very close to the big storyline I like to call Operation Zero Tolerance. Because let's not forget, in our coverage over Generation X, when it came to Jubilee, she was kidnapped by Bastion. And for Bastion, this man is getting closer and closer to the idea of kicking things off when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance. And so right now it's him saying like the time is coming very soon. And the thing is, he's correct, because the next storyline for the X-Men, this X-Men series right here, leads into Operation Zero Tolerance. And so as we do switch back over to the X-Men and also the Kingpin, you also have Sebastian Shaw arrive as well to fight against the Kingpin. Now, for me personally, I kind of thought like this was the beginning of the idea of the X-Men being able to find a cure for the legacy virus. I was completely wrong, because when it comes to the X-Men, when it comes to them really fighting against the Kingpin, his ninjas, and also Sebastian Shaw, you have Storm the leader realize that if the battle continues on, then most likely all the parties might face some serious injuries, or possibly somebody might die. And so for Storm, what she does, she goes out of her way destroying the elixir. And here's the reason why. Because she said, you know what? How about this? Neither of you guys will have the ability to use the elixir for the cure for the legacy virus to only make money. And also on top of that, for the X-Men, we will not allow you guys to hold that over our heads. Instead, we'll find a different way to get a cure for the legacy virus. And for Shang-Chi, he's kind of like, you know what? It's not a bad idea. But while you do have the X-Men on their way back home to America and also kind of thinking about what Storm did, you didn't have the X-Men get attacked by, well, a plane. And this leads into Operation Zero Tolerance. Here's the thing. We still can't just jump into it just yet, because we now got to jump back over to the Uncanny X-Men team, who are currently in space at the moment, but also a few other issues of Generation X. But we're getting very close, guys, in covering that actual storyline. But with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.